Hello chess friends and welcome to your Chess channel and welcome back to the TCEC Season 21 Super Final between the two top engines Lila C0 and Stockfish 14. So after more than 70 games the result is clear. Stockfish has a decisive +7 result. Stockfish is the winner of the TCEC Season 21 for sure. Still want to cover of course more games because really wild things happen. Meanwhile Lila C0 also won some games, but Stockfish is basically brutalizing Lila C0 whenever Lila C0 is forced to play sort of a +1 position for white. Then basically it's almost like game over for Lila C0. Stockfish always finds good ways to attack the position. Stockfish always finds good ways to find really good continuations in the build game stage. So let's check out now one great game. It was in the modern defense that basically transposed then afterwards into a Benoni defense, and the Benoni defense is sort of a defense that I really had my trouble to beat, but then I found really great ideas myself. I found also good strategies how to beat this Benoni structures. Most of the times there is this idea of black to give up the light square bishop for your knight and then to play sort of a blockade idea on dark squares. I will explain of course what's all about in the continuation of the video, but here Stockfish will simply get out of this potential trades of pieces, because Stockfish will then have a great continuation with the knights on the board, and basically Stockfish will expose the common d6 weakness that is always present in Benoni structure. So let's check out now the game. Here d4 played by Stockfish 14. We have g6 by Lila C0, bishop e4, bishop to g7, c4, and now after move c5 you see here Lila C0 is already playing this Benoni move, because if you want to take, of course it's not so good. This pawn can be recaptured with queen to a5, queen takes c5, then you lose a little bit your connection between the pawns in the center. So that's why d5 is of course the most natural idea. This line has been prearranged of course. Now d6 still prearranged by the organizer TCEC. So here we have knight to c3, and now after move e6, knight to f3, and the last move that was prearranged by the organizer was the move knight to e7, which is of course not a good move. We have to say the Lila C0 was really forced now to play a bad opening line, because the natural Benoni move sort of would be to play simply e takes d5. After c takes d5, now the natural move is simply to play knight to f6, and we would reach now the common Benoni defense setup. Here I think black has decent ideas, again with ideas to play bishop to g4, bishop to f3, and then knight to d7, knight to e5 to build sort of a blockade around the square e5. But here after move knight to f3, you see Lila C0 was forced to play now the move knight to e7. That was the last prearranged move by the organizer, as we said. Here the problem about this move knight to e7 is that you're not attacking the e4 pawn. Most of the times in the Benoni structure, white has really a huge problem to defend the e4 pawn. It can be really a long-term problem in the continuation of the game. So that's why with the move knight to f6 you would have already attacked this pawn on e4. So now you see with the move knight to e7 basically you're not attacking anything. You're maybe covering this f5 square, but I'm not sure if black in any occasion would play this f5 move. I don't think that it's a good idea to play sort of a King's Indian move where you have already weakened the pawn structure a little bit. So that's why here knight to e7 we have to say really bad opening line for Lila C0. So bishop to f4 played by Stockfish, attacking simply the d6 weakness. I'm pointing out many times in the Benoni structure here from black's perspective, black has almost in every position this problem with the d6 pawn. It's basically the main target of white. White is trying to attack this weakness in the continuation of the game. Here castling played by Lila C0. Even if you try something like e5, I like this continuation, because after e5 we can notice that the pawn structure is blocked out in the center. So it means now that this bishop is a bad piece, and even if, I don't know, maybe black tries h6 ideas, you can simply take. I think it's a decent continuation here after queen to e7, bishop to e2, and you see now if even black tries maybe this move, then you have also opportunities to go into this line. Bishop to e2 and queen to e2 leads now into a very complicated game for black, as black has really this bad bishop in the continuation simply blocked out by its own pawn structure. So that's why here after move bishop to f4 Lila C0 simply castled. We have now bishop to e2, and now after e takes d5 now we have reached the common Benoni structure with this pawn structure with the move d5 and the pawn on e4, and here against this pawn on d6, and here the pawn on c5. So it's really now the Benoni structure in the center of the board. Again, I'm pointing out the main weakness of whites is now this this backward pawn on e4. The main weakness of blacks is also this backward pawn on d6. So these are clear targets. Black and white are trying to attack these weaknesses, and as I said, we would love now from black's perspective to have our knight here on f6, where we could attack of course the weak pawn on e4, but but that wasn't the prearranged item, of course, for black. So after move c takes d5, we have now a6 by Lila c0. Here it's already a tricky move because we want to now white to play the move a4. Then of course this idea could work, bishop to g4, trying to give up maybe the bishop for a knight, and then, as we said, cement one of these knights around the square e5. But even if you try something like f5, I wanted to also show you what could actually happen if you play f5. It seemed to me in the beginning that it would be sort of a logical move for black, but actually this is a disaster immediately for black if black does it, because we can break through with the move e5. And basically what this move is doing for white now is it helps really out white, because now white got rid of his backward pawn on e4. And even if black takes, now of course d takes e5, bishop to e5, maybe bishop to e5, knight to e5. What we can notice now, I think, that black's king is simply naked. We can now use this pawn to play the move d6, then bishop to c4, also very, very dangerous. And I think also common flank attack would actually work here in this continuation with h4, h5, because the knight is again not on f6, where it could protect maybe here the h5 square. So now a fast h5, h4, h5 could actually work to split the pawn chain here in front of black's king, and black doesn't have anymore also the dark square bishop, which is also a good defender in front of the king. So as I said, in my opinion, this is a disaster for black. Black's king is simply naked. I think the d6 move is now a great move that we can use. Even if black manages to maybe create some kind of a blockade with queen to d6, still we can play knight to c4, kicking away the queen, and d6, then bishop to c4 maybe as a long-term plan. So then I think, as I said, we would find always good opportunities to attack black's king in the continuation of the game. So that's why f5 we have seen it's not working. It's simply strategically lost game, I think, here for black. So that's why here after move c takes d5, here a6 was played. Now we have this move a4, and now comes this tricky idea of black. Black is trying now to keep a closed game. If you play something like, let's see, h3, bishop to f3 can happen, bishop to f3, and you see now white would continue the game with the bad bishop on f3, which would be blocked out by its own pawn. And now, as a long-term plan, I think black could try queen to c7, maybe then knight to d7, and also then knight to e5. Would try to build sort of a powerful blockade around the square e5. Then I think again f5 is a logical idea here. f5 could work because now e5 is not working anymore, because you don't have any more the support with the knight. In the previous line that we have analyzed, we still had the knight, and it was possible to push through here with the move e5, because we had really a great control of the e5 score. Now the f5 could actually work in order to break here also the position on the e-file. So that's why here after move bishop to g4, Stockfish finds really a great position trade of pieces. Stockfish plays now a theoretical novelty which hasn't played so far in chess history, and at least I'm not seeing any game in the database in this particular line. After move knight to d2, we're giving up our bad bishop. We have seen that this bishop on f3, if this light for bishop comes on f3, it's simply a bad piece. It's only part of the pawn chain. So that's why Stockfish simply trades off a bad bishop for here this very powerful bishop of blacks, here bishop to e2, queen to e2, and now the game is much more simplified. But I think now the fun really begins only for white. I think the main advantage is now on white side, because as we said, now we have a clear target. It's the weak d6 pawn, which can of course attack before with the move knight to c4. Now black is in serious problems to defend the d6 weakness. So here in the game, rook to e8, you see now Lila c0 is getting the rook where already the queen and the king are. So that's why with the move f5, maybe the e file could get open and both pieces would be hanging. So that's why here first queen to d3, we have knight to c8 protecting here the d6 pawn, and now castling here played by Stockfish 14. We have knight to d7, we have now a5, which is a very important move. If here in continuation Lila c0 played b5, if knight to e5 happens, if you try maybe to attack the queen and try to centralize your knight here on this very powerful square, actually what could happen here, white can take the knight immediately out, because after bishop to e5 you don't want to of course take here with the pawn, because then we have this supported pass pawn, which is very annoying to play against. So that's why here it's already a passer for white with knight to c4. We could also make further progress, maybe try finally to play the move d6. Here in the continuation, of course, black would be forced to play bishop to e5, but now comes also this move, and even if you trade off here the bishop again for the knight, I think white is again strategically winning. We can notice now still the queen and and the knight are always stuck a little bit to the defense of the d6 pawn. Meanwhile, we can use maybe here this one, rook to b1, in order to make further progress with rook to b1, maybe rook to b3, rook to b1, again doubling up the rooks, simply attacking here further the backward pawn on b7. So there are simply, I think, too many weaknesses now in black's position. First of all, these two weak pawns, but also we can notice that we have here also a little bit weak squares in front of black's king. So in my opinion, in this top engine level, I think Stockfish would always find great ways how to attack black's position in the continuation of the game. So that's why after move a5 here, Leela c0 tried to simplify the game with the move b5. And of course, you don't want to leave your opponent with these two connected pawns here. You have to take a takes b6, queen to b6, now knight to c4. We have a rook to queen to b4 attacking the queen, but now rook to a4, counter attack here against the queen, but also protecting further the knight. We have a queen to b8 and now rook to a2. Here Stockfish of course sends some blood, because we can notice, as I'm pointing out, d6 is weak, but now also the a6 is a weakness. So now we're trying basically here a powerful battery with the rooks on the a file. Now basically, as we said, black in my opinion is simply strategically lost. So here queen to b4, again rook to b1, now knight to d6, knight to b6, pardon me, attacking the knight, trying to simplify the game. Even if you try, maybe here I've analyzed also this one, even if you try here bishop to f8, maybe in one particular moment you can protect of course the d6 weakness, but now actually white can play this move b3, because this bishop has left now the attack of the c3 knight. So now with the move b3, you see, as I said, white has built now a very, very powerful blockade here, has now a fixed position on the queen side. Basically the long-term plan is now again to play something like rook to a4, maybe rook to a1, and again build this rook battery on the a file. I think black's pieces are only used in order to defend the d6 weakness and also the a6 weakness. So it's simply too passive game here for Leela c0. So that's why after move rook to b1 here, Leela tried a counter attack with knight to b6. Stockfish simply takes the weak pawn on b6. We have now knight to b6, we have bishop to d6, we have knight to c4, we have bishop to c7, here of course getting out of the range of the knight, and here knight takes b2. That was all part of Leela c0's calculation, but it's actually not so good. Even if you try something like rook to c8, maybe to attack this bishop, still d6 is now a very, very cool move here for white. White can further also make progress with the move d7. Even if you try again this idea, knight takes b2, rook to b2, queen to c3, queen takes rook, bishop takes queen, but now with rook to b7, it's simply game over. In the next couple of moves we're playing simply d7 and also then d8, the promotion. So here after move bishop to c7, here Leela c0 tried again, pardon me, let's go back, here Leela c0 tried again this tactic, knight takes b2, we have rook to b2, queen to c3, queen takes c3, bishop to c3, but now with rook to c2 we have here a great counter attack, and now bishop to f6, played by Leela c0. Of course, Leela is trying to cover now here the weakness on d8, because now the serious threat is, as we said, d6, d7, and d8. So that's why the bishop has to now protect here the d8 square. But now comes the actual stunner of this particular endgame. So most of us, I think, would simply try something like, I don't know, rook to e2 or rook to e1 in order to defend this pawn, or would try maybe something like f3, which would be, of course, perfectly fine. Still, white is better here in this particular continuation. White has, I think, a more healthier pawn structure, and you see now both of these pawns are again simply long-term weaknesses. But here Stockfish found a brilliant move after move bishop to f6. Here Stockfish simply sacrifices here a pawn, because after bishop to e5 we have now d6, and again we're trying here d7 and a discover attack against the rook. So that's why here in this particular continuation rook to e6 was played by Leela c0. Even if you try something like, I don't know, here rook to f8, then we have this one, rook takes c5. Again you have to play something like bishop to f6 in order to cover. That was really great endgame calculation here by Stockfish 14. After move bishop to f6 we can still play bishop to d7, but the problem is now, even if you try to cover the square with bishop to d8, then you get bishop to d6 and you see the rook is trapped. Really wild stuff. how Stockfish plays now this endgame. So that was our calculation if you would have taken, of course, here. So that's why here after move bishop to e5 we have now d6 by Stockfish 14. We have now rook to e6. You see, you cannot move the rook here to f8. You cannot play the game like this, because we have seen with rook to c5 the bishop gets attacked. So in the continuation we have rook to d1, of course supporting our passer here. Very annoying stuff to handle now for Lila c0. We have bishop to d6. Here Lila c0 simply gives up now the bishop for a pawn. We have bishop to d6, and now a rook to d8. Here Lila c0 is playing sort of a pin, but now Stockfish defends this position really like a line. We have here rook to d2. We have now c4. The idea is clear here by Lila c0. Lila is trying, of course, to play c3, deflect one of these rooks from the d file, and then simply take out the bishop. So that's why here rook to d5. We have now a5, and now bishop to e5. Very cool stuff, because now after rook to d5 we have rook to d5, but the problem is now after f6 we have now great defensive move, bishop to c3, and the bishop is covering now the e1 square. So no checkmate threats here for Stockfish 14. Stockfish has defended this position, is now of course much better because of this bishop. Although white has now these two extra pawns on the queen side, but they are weaknesses, they are not connected. So of course in a couple more moves these pawns will also be taken. We have rook to b6. We have king to f1. Now of course there was this checkmate threat on b1. So after king to f1 we have now a4, rook to a5 attacking this pawn. We have rook to b3, and now Stockfish simply takes out this pawn. We have king to f7, bishop to h8. Still this bishop is staying on this long diagonal. We have now a3, king to e2. The king is marching towards the center, is helping out also the pieces here. In the continuation we have king to e6, king to d2. We have here king to d6. We have king to c2. Now h5. We have h4, king to c6. We have bishop to d4. Now king to d6, bishop to c5, the check, and here Stockfish grabs another pawn. This is now of course a completely winning endgame. King to e6, check again. We have bishop to b2, rook to b8. Now again a new check. Here Stockfish takes another pawn, simply plays now active with the rook. Again a couple more checks. Here again a check, and simply taking out also this pawn. We have a rook to g4, rook to g5. Here Lila c0 takes, but not a problem. Here we have a great move, f4. We have here a c3, bishop to c3. Here rook to c8, rook to d5, king to g4. Here Stockfish of course uses now the king, and now after rook to h5, king to g3, bishop to e1, king takes f4. In this position Lila c0 resigned. Of course it's an extra pawn. We have still also this extra bishop, so in one particular moment black has to give up maybe the rook for a pawn, and then of course it's a completely winning endgame then for white. So really great stuff. You see how this Benoni can be really bad sometimes if you don't play really this best opening, and the best opening lines, the most attacking lines that basically you can sometimes use in order to destroy white. But in this particular game I think it was a one-way ticket after this move knight to e7. So it's simply a too passive move. The normal move would be knight to f6. We have seen the problems about this move. Stockfish used now the basic elements how to attack the Benoni. Stockfish used the d6 weakness, played a powerful blockade on the queen side with this ideas a4, a5, which are also very important. And what I really liked was this moment. Let's go back a little bit. Here I liked this moment in the game. Here after move knight to f3, here after this sort of positional pin by Lila c0, in which Lila tried to give up the bishop for a knight, then maybe tried this f5. I like simply this move here, knight to d2 by Stockfish, bishop to e2, queen to e2, and now you see all of this is still a powerful bishop, but with the control of the c4 square. We have seen that Lila c0 had serious problems in the continuation of the game to defend the d6 weakness. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas in the Benoni defense. If you want to see more brutal positional and tactical games played by top engine, check out my commented chess games played by computers. And if you like to see maybe the humans battling it out in their best chess games, check out my best chess games of all time series with some great games from the past played by Garry Kasparov, Mikhail Tal, Anatoly Karpov, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.